Hey Reef Builders, Evan Montgomery coming back at you from the Reef Builders studio today. I was thinking recently, it's been a really long time. I can't even remember how long it's been since we did a video over here in this corner of the studio. The tank I'm standing behind right now is actually the first system that we set up here at the studio back in 2019, I want to say. Before that, we just had like a small nano tank. It took us a little while to get everything set up and get going. Getting these tanks leveled was no easy feat. Today's video is not really about the tank itself. It's a continuation, in a sense, of the last video that we did about some of my weekly tasks, some of my routines that I do here at the studio. And as good as a reefer as you are, you're still gonna end up with pests, especially, and this is kind of our, like, when we get new corals, we put them in here. It's not exactly quarantine, but before we put them in a display, we wanna make sure that they have as few pests on them as possible. So this is kind of where a lot of our dirtier corals end up, if you wanna put it that way. Montipora eating nudibranchs have been an issue for us since basically the first time we brought a Montipora into the studio. You have to be extremely diligent to avoid pests, and it's better to just kind of accept the reality of the world, live with the pests. If you can eliminate them, do so, but in our case, with all the systems that we run, it would be extremely time-consuming. It would be a full-time job to actually eliminate all the pests. But if we set aside a little bit of time each week to just manage the pests on the most impacted corals, then we can kind of stay ahead of it a little bit. If you have a small frag, any pest is going to be a lot more destructive inherently because it has less to fight with. You know, the pests have less to eat before it's all gone. We found in our experience that compared to some other pests, if you have a large enough coral at least, with Montipora eating nudibranchs, you do have a little bit of time. It's not like acro eating flatworms and a couple other pests that can really just, their populations just explode really quickly. That can happen with Montipora eating nudibranchs, but if you're a diligent reef keeper, you can do something about it. It's not too late. And luckily they do only affect Montipora. For our display tank that has a lot of Montipora in it, and unfortunately also has Montipora eating nudibranchs, we recently got a yellow chorus wrasse. And you know, a couple weeks later we were looking at the tank, and after 10 minutes we couldn't find a single Montipora eating, we couldn't find a single nudibranch. So there are biological control options that can work. Unfortunately, fish like that have a tendency to jump out of the tank, which is exactly what happened to ours. Even with a fully covered screen lid, he found a way. In a display tank, if you can't remove the coral easily, the best option really is some sort of biological control like that. The yellow chorus wrasse, as I just mentioned, peppermint shrimp have been known to eat them sometimes. Coral banded shrimp have been known to eat them sometimes. Obviously other wrasses, butterfly fish might eat them, certain types of filefish might eat them. We're lucky here in the coral flats because we can actually remove the corals. Nothing's encrusted on the bottom, there's no live rock or anything like that. So our method is a little bit different for how we approach pests because we can actually take the coral out of the tank. For nudibranchs, the dips don't seem to do a whole lot. And they do nothing for the eggs. We have not found a dip yet that does anything for the eggs that's not destructive to the coral, at least. Kind of staying on top of it and getting the adults as often as you can is the way that we do it. With this many corals, it's a bit tedious to go through and inspect every single Montipora, but unfortunately that's what we have to do. We usually break it up over several days, between the different coral flats, looking for different pests. So now I'm gonna go ahead and turn off all the flow pumps in here so I can see what I'm doing. I'm gonna go grab the tools I need from the workshop, and I'll show you exactly how we kill Montipora eating nudibranchs. So this really is as simple as it looks. We have our wash bottles. This is our primary way of getting the adults off of the corals. I just wanted to show you the two different kinds. Here we have like a larger one. We usually use this more of like if we do dip corals, we'll use the larger, lower pressure wash bottle to kind of rinse corals, and these come in handy for a lot of things. These with the smaller nozzle, you can really get a whole lot more pressure and focus it exactly where you want. You know, you don't want to actually damage the coral in the process of trying to help it. You could also use a water pick, I suppose, in kind of the same fashion, but those are a little higher pressure than is necessary. So we just take one of these and fill it up with tank water. So that's our primary weapon against the flatworms there. We also have the battle brush. From Battle Corals, so we use that to get kind of in the nooks and crannies. This can help take off some of the eggs. Although nothing's better at getting rid of the eggs than just, you know, if you have a large enough coral to sacrifice the affected part with the eggs on it. And then these small picks, some dental tools, can also be useful for these stubborn nudibranchs that just will not let go. And then finally, just normal super glue here. This is also good if there's a whole bunch of eggs and it's on the underside of a piece of coral that you don't want to just cut off. You can just use super glue, cover them up. It's not an ideal solution, but it is a good tool to have. These nudibranchs are pretty small. I hope this is visible on camera. I have a few guesses as to where I can find some on some of the corals that have been problematic over the years. This green one, I wish I was as good with species names as the late and great Jake Adams was. I can't tell you exactly what this is, but we basically just bring it up out of the water under the good light, and I'm not sure if you can see it, but right there at the tip of my finger, sure enough, fat and happy adult nudibranch. So what we'll do for him, because we want to keep this out of the tank, so having a tray like this, like a restaurant bus tray, really comes in useful for a lot of things, including this. So all we do is just blast him off of there. And I actually got two. So I'm sure you can't see him down in the tray. I'm gonna scoop him out and put him under the microscope and give him a good, get some good B-roll for you guys. It's really kind of hard to see them, especially depending on what light you're working underneath. These studio camera lights here help a lot in finding them. But even if I only see one, there's never just one, right? Kind of know where they're gonna be. It's like right along the edge of where the coral tissue, right along the edge of the coral tissue. So just for good measure, I'll just blast along the entire edge of the coral. See, yep, there's another big one right there that I didn't even see before. Another one. Flip it around, do the same thing. Just around the whole edge. So visually, I hardly even knew there was more than one or two. But now that I blasted the entire edge of the coral, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 that came off just by doing that. So if you stay on top of it, especially if you have a small tank with corals that you can remove, if you did this twice a week and you'd get all the adults, because you know there's a few more down in the nooks and crannies that this method does not affect. And there's likely some eggs that are about to hatch in the next day or two, unfortunately, as well. But if you stay on top of this, do that a couple times a week if possible, or in our case with the amount of corals that we have, it's more of a every other week for us. But even that, just getting the adults makes your coral feel so much better, because the eggs are there. There will be more nudibranchs in the future, but the eggs aren't actively eating your coral. If you can get these big fat adults off, you can slow down the reproduction of the nudibranchs, as well as just stopping the destruction of the coral. Yes, the problem is not eliminated, but you get the big fat hungry ones and your coral is going to be a whole lot happier. So I just pulled up another one of our problem child corals. And it doesn't really look the same out of the water as it does underwater. They look a lot more fluffy underwater, you know, obviously. But I see a big fat one there, and if there's one, I think there would be eggs, but I don't see any eggs. But it's easy enough to just take the wash bottle, and there we go. And like the other one, I'm just gonna go around the whole rim of the coral just to get the ones that I can't even see with the naked eye. And I've found them kind of in the middle of the base many, many times as well. So just kind of getting the whole underside like so. And I don't like to blast the coral tissue unless I have to. If I see one on the actual tissue of the coral on the top side, I will carefully blast it off. But you can also blast the tissue straight off the skeleton, which you obviously don't want to do that. I just got the flow going again, checking, I'd guess somewhere about 30 Montiporas in here of various species. It takes me about an hour. but that really helps out the corals a lot. Yes, they do have nudibranchs on them, but all these corals are still quote unquote happy. You know, they're colorful, they're growing, they're encrusting. And just by doing this basic technique every week or two, you know, at least a couple times a month, we really stay ahead of the problem. Yes, there's still nudibranchs there. We really wish we could just eliminate them and be done with it. Biological control is probably your best bet when it comes to actual elimination. Unfortunately, we can't really put wrasses in this tank for obvious reasons. I think they'd probably last about 6 minutes before we found them on the floor. So it's good to have some shrimp, and they might get the big ones, but if you have an ongoing issue like we have with nudibranchs, at some point the best solution, if you can remove the coral from your tank, is just to take it out, blast it off with a little wash bottle, brush the eggs off with a pick if you see any, and just try to stay ahead of it as best you can, because like most pests, it's really hard to keep them out of your tank, especially if you like acquiring corals in the same way that we do here. I'm sure a lot of you are hoping that I was going to show you like a fancy new magic dip that just eliminates the nudibranchs overnight. Unfortunately, we haven't found that yet, and we're still doing it the old-fashioned way. However, we still have happy, healthy corals that are growing, and I hope that this kind of gives you some insight into not overthinking things too much. I really hate when I see people tearing down their entire aquarium to eliminate a pest like this that's arguably not that big of a deal if you can remove the coral, and if you're going to tear down your whole aquarium, you can remove the coral. So instead of just completely wiping out your tank to eliminate a pest like this, just try to manage it. See how your corals are doing. Yes, you may have some pests. I'm sure we all have aptasia here and there. But just like aptasia, if you can get the big ones, then you know, the rest kind of just disappear into the background and you can focus on other aspects of your aquarium. Montipora eating nudibranchs are definitely one of the easier pests to physically remove. I hope you guys enjoyed this little insight into how we deal with certain pests here at the studio, nudibranchs in particular. If you have any suggestions for how to deal with nudibranchs that we could possibly implement, toss them down in the comments. If you know a fish that magically eats them and won't jump out of a tank, I'd love to hear about it. Don't forget, share this video with your friends, subscribe, hit the like button, keep watching us because we have plenty of more cool videos to show you in the future. And until then, I'll talk to you real soon.